Hello. Jim,
That sounds good.
you hear us?
Let me know when.
I think you can.
Sounds good. Okay. Sounds good. Bye. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
I'm not sure if I was gonna make it.
Just in time. Cool. I think we have everyone. It is August 15th, and we are going to start the Personnel and Ordinance Committee. Roll call for the record. We have trustee Jim Harper, trustee Carl Schnicker, trustee Amy Gardner. We have John Seitz, Bevan Harris, and myself is present. And welcome back to our third committee meeting about the short-term and long-term occupancy of RVs. So staff recommends that if we do not reach a general consensus by the end of this meeting, that we bring this to the Board of Trustees for a work session. And if we do make a general consensus by the end of this meeting, staff would like to bring the P&O's recommendations to Clarion to be incorporated into the land use code draft, which will be reviewed by the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees later this year. Okay. Cool. So any questions before we get started? No. Okay, cool. So in the memo that I sent out, I included all of those examples again, and I highlighted a few of the interesting parts of the Estes Park V-based pilot program. And I went ahead and contacted their community development director, who informed me that since adopting this in early April, no one had actually taken advantage of the program yet, so they didn't have much feedback to share. But I did think that it's interesting and worth highlighting a few things about their program. One, that they require a temporary use permit. So this is really this requires, a full planning review essentially. And that the person that pulls the temporary use permit is the business owner, not the occupant, which is different from the way Silverton currently does things. On-site employment requirement means that the qualified applicant must be employed by the property owner. So they cannot live in an RV on any citizen's property. It has to be the property owner has to be their employer. Estes Park requires that the town does an inspection after the RV is placed on the site to make sure that all requirements are followed. They only allow one RV per parcel. So that's not one RV per zoning lot or one individual lot. It's one RV per parcel under a single ownership.
Oh, okay.
So that is like a zoning lot.
Yeah, so that is a zoning lot, not like an individual lot.
Okay.
So if a property owner had 10,000 square feet, they would get one RV, not four.
Okay, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. RVs are not permitted in residential zoning districts. And then their utility requirements are interesting. The workforce RV must have an electrical supply from the same source as the parcel, and generators are not permitted. And so this is interesting because it essentially requires, through their utility requirements, it essentially requires that there is a structure on the property. Access to water must be available through the same structure on the property, and a sewer hookup is not required, but it does require that the black water tanks are regularly dumped at a permitted RV dump station. So I just wanted to go through a general overview of the Estes Park V-based program, since it seemed like you guys were interested in that last time we chatted about that.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I do like the Estes Park model. I'm sure you can make a few modifications to it. I do want to note also with the generator topic, I saw Lake City's ordinance and they also do not allow generators, which is interesting.
Which town?
Lake City.
Lake City, okay.
Okay. Well, from here, I was thinking we could just run through some of the topics that we don't quite have consensus on. Awesome. So jumping into workforce housing, RVs, the first topic that comes up is zoning districts. Last time we talked, there was a general consensus that RVs should go into most zoning districts, but there were some concerns about R1 and R1A. And so I didn't know if you wanted to dive into that a bit more right now. See if anyone had thoughts on RVs going in all zoning districts or only certain zoning districts.
I'm of the opinion that we should set it up in such a way that they can and should be allowed in all.
In all?
Yeah.
And then I think it depends too, like if we end up saying that's the business owner that needs it, or, you know, again, if we don't have generators, I do agree, after looking over it, that if we have those other things in place too, I'm fine with it being in all residential, districts.
Okay. So in all, if the requirements that we come up with result in RVs having a pretty low impact on the surrounding environment. Okay. Jim, any thoughts?
Oh, I agree. With both of them.
Great. Cool.
Yes, that's why
Great.
I'm quietly sitting.
Okay, next question is vacant land versus a lot with an improved lot. So essentially a lot with a structure, whether it's a dwelling or otherwise. So last time, some people state that they believe that we should make it as easy as possible and we shouldn't require the property to be improved. While other people had concerns that if we allow RVs on vacant land, this could result in essentially an quote unquote unregulated mini RV park. So that one is, I feel, we just didn't make it, we didn't get consensus on last time. So I wanted to open that up again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still leaning towards the side of not allowing on vacant land. Especially, I mean, I do, there's like 6 workforce RVs in town right now, is that right? That's permitted, 6 or 7?
Yeah,
Yeah, are any of them on vacant land right now?
How do you consider Ken Bowden's lots?
I know. I mean, he's got a house on the property with,
On contiguous property,
right, 5 lots.
but it could be subdivided, you know, they could be sold separately. So technically it would be vacant land. And they've been doing that for years.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I mean, I'm not advocating for it one way or another, just stating that.
Yeah, I like the idea of having it on, you know, 1 RV per parcel. So in his case, he'll be allowed to have 1.
Instead of how many does he have?
Well, he has 4 up there. And then Steve Pendleton has 3, you know, including one of his own. It would help reduce the density of it. And I definitely get a lot of feedback on it.
yeah.
I think that the biggest concern I've heard from community members is about the density, is about like this feeling of like encampments, you know, versus something that feels more like a temporary, you know, ADU situation where it's adjacent to and connected with the house and the electric and water from the house.
And there, you know, we don't know if those property owners are getting money from their employees for staying there. I've heard it.
Yeah,
I had a woman who came in who was told by someone that we charge $500 or forget what the ludicrous amount was for the permit.
well,
And I had to talk her off the ledge and convince her that that was not the case.
Mm.
And she didn't believe me. And I said,
yeah,
bring your employer in or whoever it is wants to charge you 500. We can have a conversation about it. So I think we have enough RV parks that people could be staying in an RV park that's set up for that.
space right now. A lot of them are not at full capacity.
I know. And I think,
About the summer.
Right, yeah, you know.
I think the water, the sewer and the electric is big.
Yeah.
And that ought to be set up. Anyone that has access to it that infrastructure needs to be in place.
Yeah.
And not running extension cords that are fire risk and but-
How do you do that without installing infrastructure?
I know.
Like you basically have to install an RV pad at every one of these
Well,
locations.
it kind of disincentivizes it beyond one. So plenty of people can have it set up at their house for an RV. I've got a 50 amp outlet for mine that I can plug it in if I need to. And I have water access, but I don't have 4 of them.
Yeah. And I guess my fear too, if we do allow them everywhere on vacant land, not vacant land, is if people just hold their line, like, oh, I'll just save it for an employee and then I'll make some money on the side too, where we are in a housing crisis as well. And thinking about the short-term workforce, which we absolutely need, but also the long-term and the need for infrastructure and housing as well.
And allowing them to have the RV there delays the incentive to build. In a way.
Jen, did you have any thoughts on allowing RVs on vacant land versus an improved lot?
Why, thank you. I think the 2 examples that we're using, and correct me if I'm wrong, are neighboring properties. Property owned by neighbors with
Yes.
a alley in between. One of them is currently a business owner here in town that utilizes the RVs for staff. And the other neighbor utilizes the vacant land for recreational purposes and friends, and I think charges them. That to me, I have a difficult time knowing the scarcity of housing and knowing that this is a bridge to get to where we want to be. I have a difficult time telling the business owner here in town that you can't, we understand that you need the employees, B, you need the housing, and C, you can only have one. So pick your favorite employee. That to me is difficult. On the flip side, the neighbor on the other side of the alleyway has 3 or 4 rigs on his land. And they're not business owners. They're not housing employees from what I've been told. And they're more here for recreational purposes. That to me is the difference. Can you guys hear me? Okay?
Jim, can I
That's-
interject for a second?
Absolutely. Yeah. If I'm wrong,
Steve-
tell me.
George has been coming here for several years. He works with Ken doing forging and metalwork. So he's working, he is permitted. There is another individual I don't know who's permitted on Steve's property, so that his 2 are legit. The third one is his own RV, is
Okay.
Steve's own RV. So both individuals are working in town. So I don't think that that's accurate in terms of
Well,
them.
and so that plays into my overall argument. So thank you for correcting me. Because if all these individuals have jobs and are contributing to Silverton, then this is technically workforce housing, yes? So if we're limiting 1 unit per lot, is that what we're saying, or per parcel? Where are these other people gonna go? And we've had the conversation about potentially working with the three main RV parks about carving out, a couple units for workforce housing and making those slots available, but also affordable. And the feedback I got wasn't very receptive. And maybe that has changed over the past week or two, but a couple weeks ago after our drive around town, really, in my mind, I thought that was one of the best solutions we could come up with. Encouraging our workforce housing to go to actual RV sites with all those amenities already there. But what I was told is, like myself and others, that you have a finite resource and a limited amount of time to make that money. So you don't want to carve out and you don't want to give deep discounts, even if it is partnering with the town and with the community.
Mhm.
And that's tough. And how can you say no to that?
That is tough, especially if there are, vacant lots over there.
Yeah.
Open. We drove,
I mean, you'd think
Yes.
they'd be at full occupancy, but I understand there's this idea, oh, maybe somebody's gonna show up next week. Somebody's gonna show up next week. We gotta keep that available. Like,
Right.
Well, the employers could also potentially assist in some subsidy for the housing. They do it one way or the other, and maybe it's an assist on the arrangement with the RV spots.
Yeah, so I think that is something that it sounds like we want staff to look into a bit more, is seeing if we could set up a program with RV parks. So I will make a note of that.
that would be a solution in itself, and then you can
Mhm.
shape the ordinance more so to where we don't really see a lot of RVs in residential, and they're in a partnership with these RV parks with all of the utilities there.
Right,
well, and we also don't know really what, some of these property owners might be charging for people to park on their lots. We don't really know what that gap is between what an RV park would charge and what, somebody's charging their employee to park their RV on their land. And I think that it's a big project and could be difficult to ascertain, but I think that would be helpful to know, like,
right.
what are people being charged? And is it really that huge gulf, or would it be just a smaller discount that we need to ask RV parks to help with, or ask business owners to support, to bring it into affordability? Yeah, because I do think it's really important that this isn't, if this starts becoming very expensive, then we've walked into a different problem and it's not actually a solution to the issue.
Right. And I don't know if this is true or not, but when I was reading through the Estes Park V-Base ordinance, I kind of got the sense that that's part of the reason why the owner of the property that the RV's parked on has to be their employer, because that is in the best interest of, retaining an employee, is probably not to charge a lot. So I don't know if that is a factor that you guys are interested in considering, is either requiring the property owner to be the employer, or kind of creating a condition in this permit that the property owner cannot charge for the RV to be parked in that spot.
I mean, I'd be open to adding that in there.
Mhm.
I think it's mostly, the business owners who are trying to find housing for their employees, like Ken and them.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the RVs that are on Steve's lots and they're substantial. I mean, between $50,000 and $100,000 RVs.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily for us to judge on it, but if we required the residents or the workers to be at RV parks and we created a system where employers could help subsidize that or have some discounted rate for guaranteed residency
Yeah.
occupancy on the RV park, I think it could work out. That's kind of a win-win for both, but part of achieving that would be requiring that there only be one RV allowed per parcel. And I think beyond that, it gets to be too dense. And, not to say that the housing isn't an issue, but I don't know. I don't know how it's gonna fix the problem of density in residential areas.
Yeah, because that's the biggest thing, seeing that in residential areas in town is what I've heard from people as well. But yeah, I wonder,
People expect to see like one RV on a property,
yeah, that's,
whether it's your own or someone else's, but when you see 3 or 4 in close proximity or more, it stirs up the, discontent.
yeah, and then again, I think we all agree on this last time too, but if we can't come to an agreement with an RV park, having those permits, making them required and charging for those permits, I think is super important to help regulate that as well. Been driving around, we're like, there's so many RVs around.
We don't charge.
They permitted or yeah.
We don't charge. It's just identifying that they are there legally and having a paper trail to it.
Right. I do think the discussion at the last meeting, though, is that having some kind of like, maybe even just a token fee creates a little bit more of a sense of responsibility, or could create a sense of responsibility. But
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's kind of an easy lever to pull that might make it feel like more of a substantial process. And people, it's hard to say how folks would react, but I think that fee wouldn't have to be large or prohibitive at all to have some kind of impact.
Especially if, they're dumping out at RV parks. And I think John mentioned the other week that town may not see some of that money from their waste as well, and just help contribute to town would be helpful.
Mhm. Okay. So requiring a fee is, that is something we talked about last time. And then as another thing Estes Park does is require a monthly fee. And that could potentially take care of some of those utility fees essentially. Do you guys have any thoughts on charging us like a small monthly fee for the permit?
I think Jim has a comment.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I am 100% full support of fees. I think the application fee alone, if the business owner or if the individual is investing themselves here in the summertime, that investment fee should be a minimum of $250. There should be a 2 in front of that 50. Flat out. And that's going to weed out a lot of the people that are not serious. And 9 times out of 10, that business owner is going to pay that fee because they're investing in that individual. And then having a minimum of $100 monthly, and essentially it's a monthly renewal to keep that permit going from May through October. And I'm just May through October, I'm throwing that out there. But that fee should be there. And again, that puts the onus back on that permit holder, that individual, and the business to make sure that everything is being followed. The paper trail is there. They're in compliance with Bevan. And then it's on us to follow up and make sure the permits are in the window, color coded if I think we discussed that at one point in time. But making sure they're in the window so you can come by and do a quick spot check and then move on to the next one. But what you're doing is you're making people responsible for themselves by having them pay that fee and put that in the window. And that takes a lot of the pressure off of the town and Bevan.
Mhm.
That's my opinion.
I agree with Jim.
Good idea, Jim.
I don't think $750 for the summer is prohibitive. I think that
Oh,
that's,
no, I agree.
yeah.
Especially if we have like long-term workers too, paying monthly fees and paying for electric, paying for water sewer monthly.
Mhm.
Um, How do you guys feel about inspections before from Bevan, the building inspector?
I'd like to hear from Bevan. You feel about that?
I'm fine with it.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to know that they have tanks and they're not dumping it appropriately and I want the authority to like go and check if I need to. Because if I am allowed to check once, I can check twice or 3 times. And that, it kind of opens it up, just lets them know like, hey, I'm around and, you need to keep it tight and it's just, it's a structure of occupancy in a way. So there is some responsibility on our part to make sure that that's not going to negatively impact their neighbors and the community. John?
Oh, as far as inspections go, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think I'm mostly thinking about the water and sewer stuff. Water is a gallon, Jim made a good point at our utility committee meeting. A gallon in and it is a gallon out. So if they're paying for water, wherever they're getting water, somebody's paying for the water. They're not getting the water for free. But the sewer is probably a bigger concern. Do we want to, if all these guys are dumping their tanks at the RV site and the RV place is getting revenue, but we're paying to treat it and it's going down our pipes that we pay to maintain.
yeah,
That's something that I'm a little bit more concerned about. And I've just been sitting here trying to think about how we could solve that problem. Because there's no way to really meter it.
yeah.
You can't really meter septage going out of a RV park. So we couldn't charge them by gallons out because the RV park is only going to use so many gallons and their gallons are going to be going to the sewer plant. But then you have additional septage that's coming on top of what they're using. So you can't bill them for their septage just based on the water that they use. So I think that, yeah, Jim, I'm finishing up here. I think that part of that fee should be considered to pay for wastewater.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's me.
Maybe if we're thinking about fee, if we're thinking about a fee, add that in, that's an extra and a significant one.
Yeah,
So that's on top of the 350 and the 100 a month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have like a ballpark number in mind? Like, are you thinking like 50 or like 200 for a month? In that range?
That's a good question.
Okay, so maybe we'll
I need to think.
ask it a week out later.
But yeah, if you think about like, what does a single family home use? And let's say a single family home averages 5,000 gallons every 2 months. And that's all going in the sewer. And then you can kind of break that out from our existing utility rates. And then be like, well, it's an existing utility rate. If we're at $70 or a cycle, it's $35 a month. You probably almost want to add that in. If they're going to be there for 6 months, do we do it by the month? And do we charge them a utility stipend, if you will, for like what a single family home would use, or maybe a EQR of that, maybe 0.8 per RV or something like that. If RVs are using less, 0.5 even, but then it's consistent and really, you could really like nail it down and we get what we need to get from that RV for treating that septic.
The
We
electric
could work
is,
on that.
right, and the electric is essentially paid for by the property owner, correct?
Yeah,
If they're not, using.
but that's
a
not
generator.
us anyway.
No, I know. I'm just thinking about metering it or evaluating how much is used. And if I'm sure the owners are charging them some kind of rent because they're using their water and sewer
Right.
and electric.
I've got this on my list, so I'm going to try to do a calculation and some options, not necessarily for this meeting, but if we're gonna recommend rates at some point, I don't know if we're gonna recommend rates right now, are we?
I don't think
I don't know, I wasn't part of that conversation.
Like,
Oh, for the land use code?
no, for RVs.
Oh, for RVs. Yeah, I think that's something I would want to know is if you guys would like to be, like, what you would like to charge for, and you can come up with that number later, but.
Okay,
Yeah, I like the idea of having it on like an EQR basis, though. I think that
yeah.
that feels fair, based on what is a single family home use and.
Well, we have that. We have EQRs for RV sites.
Right.
So why don't we just take the base rate and charge an EQR exactly the same that we would for an RV site for sewer?
Yeah, that feels good to me. Yeah.
I like that.
Well, yes, that does feel good. The application fee was, what I was thinking was $250, just flat for an application fee. A portion of that application fee goes to the sewer. And then a portion of the monthly fee, which is $100, I'm just looking at right here, goes, and I don't know how you percentage you'd earmark that. But then using my monthly billing, obviously it's a business, so having to charge that resident a little bit more, whatever that percentage looks like, for the additional load on the sewer system, to me would be a no-brainer, and it would help the overall cause. And looking back at our utility meeting yesterday, and the discussion of just bringing everything up 15% to that threshold, I think earmarking real money in the form of these fees, but then also having a surcharge on the sewer portion of your bill will also offset some of the costs that these RVs are generating, and some of the strain that they're also putting on our system as a whole.
So you're saying that that would get billed out to the property owner, like it would be tacked onto the bill for the house?
I would. And I think
Yeah.
that comes into enforcement when you submit your application to whomever at town. John Q. Public is going to be living in his RV at this address. This address, we already know, has a home site on it. And then we're going to tack on a surcharge because they've got an RV attached to that house for X amount of period of time, until they tell the town, hey, John Q. Public is leaving for the season, and then we'll remove it off your bill. It's just a thought, but that for me, for tracking purposes and really seeing the impact, I think you could really see a real impact, a positive impact, and by tracking it that way. That's just me. Maybe that's too complicated. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of a newer idea, honestly, so this is something that staff can talk a bit more about and look into some options, but I think that's a good point.
Yeah, it is.
It made me think of zircons and having a refundable fee for anyone that brings a zircon in, for instance. So $750 refundable fee that you would get when you show proof that you've removed the container. And in this case, it's the surcharge would be, they'd just be kept getting billed till they can prove that
Right.
the RV's not there.
Yeah, I like that, concept of requiring follow-up at the end of the
Right,
term, but without adding an extra structure. Would be kind of built into that,
right.
that billing structure.
And I'm happy to inspect, but I don't necessarily want to have to constantly be looking and checking to see if they've left yet, to validate.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That seems like, whenever we can accomplish something without adding a whole other process, it seems
Yeah.
the right way to go.
Well, I think we've honestly made a lot of progress and we kind of are at consensus. Unless there's anything else that you all wanted to talk about.
We've already done this to death, but
Yeah, we've.
no generators is my opinion. Strong.
Yeah, because that is so hard, 8, the time frame in between and that also. And if we are stricter on generators, stricter on the application process, stricter on prices, I am more okay with being more lenient on zoning and things like that of where they can be.
Okay.
So with respect to fees, you're just gonna say that the P and O committee recommended fees.
Yes, and then.
That's all you need to say now. We'll sort it out later. Okay.
Yeah, because this will go into the code and the code never discusses the actual fee numbers. I was gonna say the one thing we didn't come to consensus on was the amount of RVs allowed per parcel and whether or not the area would need to be improved, but with the recommendation for no generators, that essentially requires that there is a structure on site. And Jim, I know that that's one thing that you disagree with, which is fine. Is that something that we feel like we should bring? Would you all want to bring this to the Board of Trustees to discuss kind of that specific issue?
Sure, yeah.
Well, my question was gonna be, with regards to are we saying, the parcel owned by Mr. Smith, he owns 5 lots. His home is only on 2 of those 5 lots. So we're saying that he cannot place 3 RVs on any one of those lots? Is that what we're saying?
No, so in this situation, I think the way that I've been interpreting what we're talking about here is that if Mr. Smith owned 5 lots, he had a dwelling on 2 lots, he would be able to put an RV on any of those 3 lots.
But only one though.
Well, either only one or what we've also discussed in the past is 1 per 2,500 square feet or 1 single lot.
See, I'm very open to having 1 per lot.
Okay.
And that goes back to us even allowing building on 1 per lot. On a 1 lot instead of 2, but having, you can, in my mind, better regulate it and not have all the sorts of silliness going on. If you have 3 lots and you have 3 RVs, they're pretty much spaced out. You don't have the clutter, you don't have the mess, and you don't have the atmosphere created looking like a miniature RV park. That's my opinion. I might be wrong, but that's my opinion.
Okay, so before we break into the density question, I just want to confirm that you would be okay recommending that to have an RV on your parcel, you're also required to have a structure or a dwelling on the parcel.
Say that one more time.
So you would be okay recommending a policy where RVs cannot be on just strictly a vacant place. So you would have to have a dwelling on that parcel in order to be eligible to have a workforce RV on that parcel.
No, my personal opinion, you could have it on a vacant lot. That's just me, but I know that I'm in the minority on that one.
Okay.
But also taking that into consideration and what we've just discussed as a team is you can't have a generator. We're discouraging generators if I'm understanding this conversation correctly. And if we're discouraging generators, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to have any improvements to those vacant lots. So therefore that lot becomes disqualified anyway.
Right.
If I'm understanding it correctly, this conversation.
Yeah. But there is the battery thing. So if people could charge their batteries and run off batteries on a vacant lot, then potentially you could have an RV on a vacant lot running on batteries. I'm not really sure if that would be practical for any length of time.
I feel like for months for workforce, though, they're probably less likely that they would do that maybe.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're asking me if I'm okay with that, yeah, I would be okay with that. But I also agree that that's probably less likely to happen if someone's going to be staying for the duration of the summer. Because it's just not, I don't know, in my mind, it just doesn't seem feasible long term, but who knows? But yeah.
So is it a nay then? Is it a yay or a nay on vacant lots?
Oh, well, I'm a yay, but I also know that I'm in the minority. So, I mean, whatever we decide is fine with me.
Yeah, I think what we don't have consensus on is density and vacant lot versus improved lots. So if at this point, I think I would recommend bringing this to the Board of Trustees if that's okay with all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Well, I will talk to Gloria about that. And see if we get that scheduled. We still haven't talked about family RVs, so I want to talk about that before we move on. Any other comments on workforce RVs? All right, nice work, everyone. That was an accomplishment. Okay, so short-term RV occupancy as a convenience to visiting friends and family. The current code essentially allows friends and family to visit in RVs for 20 days, and that property gets 20 days total for the calendar year. And the RVs can be parked on site within setbacks, or they can be parked on the street adjacent to the property. So right now, someone could come and essentially camp on their vacant land for 20 days out of the year. And people, often talk to me about that and do take advantage of that. So that is something that happens. We don't really regulate the 20 days. It's something that property owners kind of have to determine on their own unless it's noticed by the code enforcement officer. So that's kind of an overview of the current policy. Anything to add, either of you on that?
Not really. I'm not that concerned about a 20-day thing. As long as it's not on there for 20 days and then they move it off for a week and they come back for 20 more days.
Right.
And you kind of get back into the same sewer discussion and more of the same problems that we've been discussing with the workforce stuff.
Yeah.
And what about generators? Are they allowed to have generators?
Yeah, there's no provisions that prohibit generators.
There's a timeline, so it's not, I think it's after 8 o'clock. And not before 7.
That is correct.
Why a generator is needed really, if there's a improved structure there,
Yeah.
But I mean, like I have, next door neighbors to a lot that's vacant and the owners came and camped there on the 4th of July and I was pretty frustrated with the whole situation, but yeah, I don't think that should be disallowed. I just think that maybe there needs to be better communication to people about I mean, I guess this is kind of a disjointed thought, but my concern was that I woke up on July 5th and there were 6 RVs crammed into this, little 2-lot space.
Between you and Mike?
Yeah, like a lot. Yeah, they were crammed in there. And they left that day, it was just for one night, but it seems a little bit crazy, like that is not the intention of allowing this, is that you can roll up with all, 30 of your extended family and camp in a residential neighborhood. I mean, and
Yeah.
I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing to allow people to do that. I'm okay with it personally, but I think that seemed like taking it too far.
And Silverton is different because you don't have this in other communities.
Right.
Or it's rare, it's more rare, right?
Right.
So in Silverton, I mean, if I had that problem, then I would be like, why don't you guys do something about this?
Mhm, mhm.
So I don't know if we want to consider,
Yeah.
what do you guys want to?
Yeah, it was like 2 motorhomes, 2 pull behinds and.
They had 2 lots? They had 2 lots there or?
That's 2 lots, I think.
So they were only allowed technically to have 2 RVs there.
Right.
And I think the issue of having RVs on unapproved property should,
So our current code for friends and family states 1 per lot,
yeah.
just like we're proposing for workforce. Okay. So 1 per lot, what about generators?
It doesn't say anything about generators.
It does say generators have it, like, you're allowed to use them at specific hours.
It's like 8 to 8.
That is only in the section of code for workforce. So that's in the nuisance code.
Okay.
But that's not in just the general campers code, which is in the zoning chapter.
I would personally advocate for no generators, like.
As-
For any RVs.
If we're saying in the code, no generators to long-term, it should just be across the board. Especially people are coming to camp on their property. Generally, at times, they don't need a generator for that.
I don't know, I mean, during the day. I think if someone has to recharge their batteries.
Yep.
It's no different than running a lawnmower or,
Right.
But
the difference is that most people don't run their lawnmower for 3 hours, hopefully.
How big your lawn
I have
is.
a really big yard. Unbelievable. So I guess the first question that I have is, should RVs be allowed to be parked on property or adjacent to a residential property as a convenience to visiting family and friends? The first basic question.
I think yes.
Yeah. Okay. And sounds like we are interested in not allowing generators.
You have any problem? Oh. Okay.
And the Lake City one doesn't, it has a special use permit for long-term, but for short-term, correct me if I'm wrong, it does not allow generators, just.
Yeah, I don't believe so. I'd have to go back and review it.
Yeah.
To give you a definitive answer, but I don't think so.
And then it does say, state's code, that such allowed short-term use of private land shall not involve more than 1 travel vehicle at a time and shall not continue for more than 7 consecutive days from the inception of allowed use.
So would you all be interested in recommending to limit the amount of RVs that are allowed on a property?
I would say 1 across the board for,
1 per parcel.
this short-term use and for the local employee housing.
I like that consistency.
Yeah,
across the
and if
board.
you're giving exceptions out here and there,
That's on the property. In this right of way.
on this.
I think either, I think associated with each dwelling, 1.
Yeah,
I mean, that's,
I like the right of way. Personally, I have an RV and I've had friends, we have a really small house, but we have no yard.
Right.
So I just have a truck bed camper and it's nice if we have extra people, I can throw somebody in the truck bed and I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys do, but
Yeah, I have
one per property and you could use right of way or lot.
Yeah,
I had friends and family in, no one was in my silent camper, which is, on my property, but my buddy and his wife were in their camper in my yard. So technically I've got an RV and a camper, but there's only occupancy of one.
Well, I think there's always gonna be like tricky situations, but
Right, like.
I don't think any of this applies to people storing their RV,
Right.
yeah, I don't.
Can be on the right of way if it's, got dates on it, so.
Truck camper in my truck.
And that's less of an issue than monitoring, workforce housing or people who may not be workforce housing that are trying to appear to be,
Right.
right?
Any thoughts on this? Jen?
I am not for banning generators. I
Okay.
don't believe in that. If we're gonna tell people to shut off their engines, then they could shut off their engines, then they can't operate a chainsaw, they can't operate anything. I understand for several hours on end, but we have a noise ordinance for that reason. 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. is our current noise ordinance. So I'm not for that. That's just me.
I'm with you on that, Jim. I'm with you on that. I think there are cases where people need to charge batteries
Oh,
or.
absolutely. That's just me. I also stand by one RV per lot. So if and I'm just using the fictitious Mr. Smith as an example, if Mr. Smith has 5 lots and he has a house on 2 of those lots and he has 3 additional lots, which is considered just his front lawn, Mr. and Mrs. Smith can put, in my opinion, 3 either trailers or RV units on those lots. That's my opinion.
Okay, and I think that what you guys are referring to is one per like essentially zoning lot or parcel, right? So that is, and you're referring to one town lot, which is 25,500. Okay, so that is different.
That is, and that's, again, that's just my opinion, and obviously.
Yeah, totally. I just wanted to clarify there.
Yes, yeah.
I personally have less of an issue with that for the short-term use, but I do think that there's a lot of value in like creating as much consistency as we can with this.
Okay.
And also to clarify for me, like generators that I'm looking at and just in this ordinance specifically, just for residential use. You need to use a generator for other things to, charge your chainsaw or something like that, I'm fine with it. But just simply for
That's
residential.
the modern world. You got to run a generator to charge your electric chainsaw.
Well, then it gets into, can I not have my generator on when the power's out,
Right.
That's.
That's a
mean,
good point. That's a good point.
I'll provide a real example that we had within the past 10 days is when the town's power went out.
Yeah.
At I think it was 7:04 or 7:05 a.m., we pulled out a silent Honda generator. And we were able to run the entire coffee shop off this one generator that was parked. We pulled it out and put it behind a vehicle to muffle the sound. But we were essentially able to provide coffee and other goods for guests and citizens alike during that power outage. So for me, banning generators, I'm not about banning generators. That to me is an overreach, even for generators to power an RV, power a home. Growing up in South Florida, everyone has a 4 to 6 ton HVAC unit attached to their house. Listening to that hum, listening to the motorcycle on and off is just a normal way of life. I love the fact that we're so spoiled and live in the mountains and get to listen to all the the beauty that we listen to, but I do have a hard time banning generators. Be even between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. That's just me.
I don't take a huge issue to that. I think that's
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's a place where we can probably, respectfully disagree and still come to the consensus that it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that. And, at first I was just specifically thinking of RV residential, but I do hear I am okay with keeping it as it is.
All right. And then, at a previous meeting, we kind of started to get into short-term RV occupancy and someone mentioned an idea of requiring a permit. Wondering what you guys think about requiring a permit to be displayed in a window, for someone occupying an RV as a convenience to visiting friends and family.
I like the idea, but I think in practice, it could be very difficult to get people to do that. And I think that sometimes it's a, planned visit, and oftentimes for many people, it's not very planned. And I think that to do that justice, it would be pretty burdensome to have people available to be issuing those permits at short notice.
Well, one thing that, yeah,
And this would be very different from like a land use permit. This would be like, you come into town hall, you say, this is my address. I'm gonna have a friend visiting through these dates, and then town gets tracked.
Right.
I wonder if you say like a permit required if you're staying for a certain amount of consecutive days on that land.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with both of you on this one. If someone's popping into town for a few days, then they're just popping in and they're popping out. But if you're staying the full, I don't know, 20 days or whatever we're saying, which is short term, maybe there should be, even if it's a piece of green legal paper that just goes in your window that says, hey,
Yeah.
temporary permit, or just something, anything that just differentiates short from the long. But I agree with both you guys on this one. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd be in support of something that's like, a stay greater than 3 nights or something requires a permit. And then that also, again, contributes to some cohesiveness between what we're doing with the short term and the long term. And like residents know that if there's an RV parked on a lot for a long time, they can expect to see a permit in the window.
Right.
and is 20 days too restrictive for
I don't think, I mean,
I think if we went,
a year?
days in Pagosa.
yeah, I think if we went longer, we would, then personally, I would want to restrict how many can be consecutive. But I think that just becomes complicated.
Yeah.
I think 20 is fine.
20 is a lot.
3 weeks. Yep.
Well, and this is also like not considering, people can also have an RV for construction and stuff, like
Yeah.
that's not a 20-day limit, correct?
Right. So they can be there,
Year, the duration of.
be there year round, for the time of the building permit.
Okay, yeah.
So 2 years max.
I guess we could do it like camping around 14 days, but I mean, I'm fine with 20, but if anyone wants to go lower.
I just have to imagine that there was some discussion around 20 at some point, and it doesn't seem so far off the mark that we would need to completely change it.
Yeah, I believe it's the same in the county.
Sorry, so I'll let you just-
It is, yeah.
Okay, though, that was all the questions I had about short-term RVs. Was there anything else you guys felt like you wanted to discuss on short-term occupancy of RVs?
I guess I do wonder too, if they're staying the 20 consecutive days, if there's a clause to pay some sort of fee to the town for sewer, but I'm not picky on that.
I mean, they're probably gonna be on a tank, in their own
If they're
tank.
dumping at an RV site or something.
Right.
I think if that's an issue, then that would be something that would maybe encourage or make me feel like we should shorten the term if, you know, personally, I feel that like for this idea of a short-term RV for visiting friends and family, charging a fee feels like a bit much.
Yeah, you're right.
I think just having permits available for residents to obtain when they know, I mean, generally you're gonna know someone's coming into town. It's not unfair for us to ask them to do that so that we're monitoring. I see the same camper, different places around town. And you know, at what point can I say you've been here too long or in this spot too long? But
Okay. Well, I think we got through that a lot quicker than we were expecting, so that's great. So it sounds like we want to bring, some of the discussion we had around the, long-term RV occupancy by local workforce to the Board of Trustees in a work session. And perhaps some of the things that we didn't reach consensus on from the short-term RV occupancy as well.
Yeah.
That sound like a good plan? Okay. Anything else before we close this?
Yeah, I had one more thing. Again, I don't know if you guys can see this, but there is a specific line that says other miscellaneous and penalty on the sewer bills, on the water and sewer bills. And that to me would just be a perfect place for these long-term summer individuals that are piggybacking off of established taps to just have that little additional fee there that goes right into our utility fund. That's all I had to say.
Sweet. Yeah, that's a great point. And so maybe when we come back to the Board of Trustees, we can come with a bit more information on fees, how we charge those fees, if that goes into property owner's utility bill, or if we'd set up a different billing system. And then I believe you also wanted more information on potentially setting up a program with the local RV parks. And then if possible, getting an idea of what people are charging to have an RV on their property. Is there anything else you wanted more information on?
I think that's
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I think we can close this.
So,
Thanks, Lucy.
thanks.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.